good evening, and welcome to this month's edition of The Edge. I'm your host, Trevor Lewington, and every third Thursday, we're interviewing community and business leaders that are having a real impact here on Southern Alberta. And whether you're watching on Roku TV, Fire TV, Apple TV, YouTube, look, we don't care how you got here. We're just really happy that you could join us. So tonight, I'm calling this the Rose Between Two Thorns episode. Really excited to have not just one, but two lawyers in the house. We've got Charlene Scheffelmair from Davidson, welcome, and Ian Andrews from North & Company. Thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're going to dive straight in. Charlene, I know you got your law degree from Thompson Rivers University and sort of got there by virtue of a Bachelor of Education from MRU, Mount Royal in Calgary, right?
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that journey and how did you go from education to law? It doesn't feel like a normal pathway.
Yeah, so growing up, funny enough, I was always really interested in the TV law and, those big cases in the U.S. that were, plastered across the magazine checkout stands. And so actually I thought I wanted to be a Crown prosecutor.
Okay.
Kind of all growing up, which is the farthest from the law that I practice now. I have no interest in practicing that law now, but somewhere along the way, I got away from that dream and thought I wanted to pursue teaching instead, and really enjoyed doing that. So I pursued that, and the law dream kind of fell to the wayside. And then I ended up working as a legal assistant in Medicine Hat while I was doing my undergrad, and kind of in doing that, a couple of the lawyers there started looking at me a little sideways and going, "What are you doing in education? You should be a lawyer." Yeah. And as soon as they started asking that question, I started asking that question of myself and going, "What am I doing in education? That's a great question." And so one thing led to another. Started writing the LSAT, applying to law school, got into TRU, and the rest was history there.
So, did you ever teach, or you just sort of did the degree and then?
Yeah, no, I didn't end up teaching. I did my final practicum, and I found out that I got into law school literally like the week before it started. So we were actually at Teachers Convention. That was slated to start in February, and I found out like the week prior. So I knew going into my last practicum that I just had to get through that practicum, and then I was off to law school.
Very cool. Because I find a lot of people, especially young folks, feel this pressure that they're supposed to follow this specific path, and once you're locked into a specific degree or educational accomplishment, that's it. And so it's always great to hear that people can just literally jump streams and do something completely different.
Yeah, sure.
Speaking of that, your background, Ian, is biochemistry. You did an undergrad here at the U of L. You're a local grad, and then did law at the U of A.
Yep, that's right.
So talk to us about that. That feels like an equally divergent pathway.
And I think that's something that's true for most lawyers if you talk to them. It feels like, and I don't want to be overly negative, but law is oftentimes a career of last resort. Okay? People do their first degree. They go into post-secondary not necessarily knowing what they want to do with their lives. They get that degree, and then they go, oh, wait, you have to have a job? Something actually has to come from this degree.
Gotcha.
And it's true, right? One degree often leads to the next. And I think it's true for many lawyers. It particularly is true in our case. We got to the end of our degree and we realized that, there's not really something in terms of a career there that we want to do. We start looking for other options. And that's where law comes in, is because we see it as being a profession, a job, a career that can be very rewarding, that can stem from anything, be it an education degree, be it biochemistry, whatever you want. You can become a lawyer and find a specialized niche where that education and expertise becomes very valuable.
So how does your sort of first degree show up or manifest in your practices today? Like, did it teach you anything that you apply? I mean, you're working in sort of the commercialization, patents, intellectual property sort of space. So I'd imagine that science background sort of gives you an appreciation when you get some weird, crazy scientists come to you with an application.
That's exactly right. And maybe I'll jump in first.
Yeah,
for me, like a large portion of my practice is the communication of science. Okay. That's what I like to think I do for a living, is I take the information that scientists have, right, the very technical knowledge, and I try and distill it and explain it in a way that will allow business leaders, will allow the courts, will allow other individuals to understand that science and be able to use it to make informed decisions.
Okay.
So what I use my background for is helping to explain and talk about and let other people understand the technical sciences so that they can make those important decisions.
Sort of a translator and a bridge between those two very different
Exactly.
groups. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks. And then from an education perspective, do you find yourself teaching clients or teaching others, or?
Yeah, I think those skills, and I kind of have a natural knack and desire to teach, and so it comes out in small ways when I'm in client meetings, and you start to see the client's eyes glaze over, and you go, okay, they're not understanding what I mean, and I need to shift gears, and so that's given me those skills. But I think it also allows me, with my newsletter, for instance, the Chapette. That was kind of born out of wanting to do some public legal education and always kind of wanting to be a blogger, and finally I just said, why not both, and just did that out.
This naturally comes
own.
Together. Yeah.
And even through articling, being a principal and students, I have a desire at some point to be a principal and pass that knowledge on, and so eventually I'll get to teach in that capacity. And so I think there'll be lots of facets where that education background will lend itself.
Okay. So, you both, again, get to law, the career of last resort, but we're glad you did that. And you both chose Lethbridge, and sometimes both attracting and retaining young professionals to what is essentially a secondary or considered a small market. What either brought you back to Lethbridge, or what brought you to Lethbridge, and why did you stay, I guess, is my question. Because I feel like both of you are so accomplished in your careers already that you could literally go anywhere and do whatever you like. So why Lethbridge? Why here?
I can go first. So for me, it was very much a situation where I was returning to Lethbridge. So I did my law degree at the University of Alberta, and I started practicing in Edmonton at a large firm there, in an intellectual property practice group. And what I realized is that my dreams of being in a big firm practicing this particular area of the law were interesting, but not necessarily as gratifying as I expected it to be. So when the opportunity to move home came about, and I saw the benefits of work-life balance in particular that could allow me to enjoy, I jumped at the opportunity and I moved home to Lethbridge, and I have not looked back since. And for me, the key point, the critical point, is really this idea of it's a lot easier to be a big fish in a small pond. I can have a greater impact on my clients' lives. I can have a greater impact on my community when there aren't 100 or 200 other people trying to do the same thing.
Okay.
It's now on me, and that allows me to have a lot more control and a lot more impact on my community, and that's what I find to be particularly gratifying and the reason why I'm most glad that I did move home.
Awesome.
I would echo those comments. Being a big fish in a small pond, is one of the reasons. But for myself, my family, my husband's family, are kind of split between Medicine Hat and Calgary. Even though my undergrad is from MRU, it was on the Medicine Hat campus, so I did all of that except for one semester that I did at U of L in Medicine Hat. And so my husband and I, we couldn't decide between Medicine Hat or Calgary, and we finally said, why don't we split the difference and just put roots down in a new city and do something fresh. And so that's what we did. And we both like the kind of big city feel with that, or big city amenities with a small town feel. And it's just, I like the proximity of international travel with Calgary, the US border, BC being right there. There's just something about Lethbridge that's uniquely positioned, the work-life balance. There's a lot of things that I just enjoy about being here, and we've been here 5 years, and same thing, I've not looked back.
Yeah, I've lived in bigger centers, and every time I drive on the Deerfoot, I'm reminded why I don't live in Calgary, because when you're parked there, that's not usually a challenge in this community, right? Yeah. So there's small advantages just like that.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Ian, in your practice is really focused around intellectual property, and you're a patent agent. Can you maybe explain for the folks at home, what exactly is that? What is IP? What do you do?
It's a great question. It's a great question. When you think intellectual property, what do you think of? Most people draw a blank. Okay, unless they're actually involved in this area of business, it's not something that is intuitive to many people because it's not something that people often deal with in a commercial sense. So when we're talking about intellectual property, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about intangible assets.
Okay.
So they're assets like any other sort of business asset. You can buy them, you can sell them, you can lease them. But they're intangible, they're not physical, and that creates a bunch of issues. So think, for example, about a tangible piece of property, okay? Your car sitting on the street.
I can see it, I can touch it, it's
You can see it, you can touch it, it's a thing. How do you protect it? Well, you have a key, you can lock it, you can prevent someone else from driving off with your car.
Right.
Well, now imagine the situation where you have your car sitting there, it's locked, you've done everything that you can to stop someone from taking off with it, but someone walks up to it and right-click and copy-paste your car. And then they drive off with a copy. Well, it's a different can of worms, right? You need different tools to protect those types of assets that can be copied and taken in a way that we don't see with physical objects. And that's where intellectual property law comes in. So we have different laws that protect different types of intellectual effort.
Okay.
We have patents that protect inventions. We have trademarks that protect brand elements. And we have copyright that protects types of works, so artistic works, literary works, dramatic works. My job as a patent agent in particular is to help people get patent protection over their inventions. So if someone develops a new type of machine or a new composition of matter or something along those lines that is eligible for patent protection, you go to a patent agent to help write a patent application to try and convince a patent examiner at the patent office that your invention is eligible for protection and should be awarded a patent. And a patent is basically a 20-year commercial monopoly to make, use, and sell a particular invention within Canada. So that's me wearing my patent agent hat. I'm also an IP lawyer, which means that I have a much broader scope of practice than a lot of patent agents specifically
If they're
have.
only doing that kind of work.
Exactly.
Okay.
So an agent prosecutes patent applications, an IP lawyer does more. So I help people with business transactions. If they have to license their intellectual property, they want to buy and sell intellectual property, I am involved in that. I'm also involved in strategy discussions, and part of my practice is litigation as well. So when people need to defend their IP, or when they need to take down someone else who is misusing intellectual property or IP, I can go into court and I can advocate on their behalf. So I help people get intellectual property protection, I help them commercialize that protection, and I help them defend or enforce that protection, wearing my lawyer hat as well.
Okay. And is that fairly typical to have sort of patent agent and litigation blended into the same human, or is that normally separate?
No, it's not.
Because you're uniquely positioned.
I'm a bit of a dark horse in that I do both prosecution work, so patent prosecution, as well as litigation and employment work, as in addition to that. Most patent agents or most patent lawyers who focus only on getting those applications focus their practice on that alone, which is great. If you're focused in a particular area, you can become very specialized. But I think the benefit of doing a litigation practice as well is that you see how this stuff actually turns out in the real world, right? You put it in front of a judge who's supposed to interpret this patent application, right? Define the four corners of the IP protection that exists. Well, having that litigation experience allows me to draft patents with that in mind, right? How is a judge going to see this?
Like, I know this will satisfy the patent office, but is it actually enforceable?
Exactly, exactly. And that's how I bring that scientific background that I have in biochemistry to light. And that's a communication piece, right? Is thinking about, okay, it's not going to be a specialist in this area who's going to be looking at these documents who is going to care at the end of the day. Okay, it's a judge who probably was a criminal lawyer before becoming a judge. They don't know the first thing about protein dynamics or the mechanics of inventions or any of the other technical subject matter. So I'm able to draft, I think, documents and prepare things in a way that is able to reach that audience much more effectively than someone who is more narrowly focused.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. And Charlene, you talk about being a solicitor-focused practice, so maybe you can explain the difference between solicitor and barrister, because I think people watch too much American TV generally. They don't maybe know those terms.
Yeah.
And then talk to us a little bit about what your practice focuses on.
Yeah, so barristers, that word kind of comes from the bar or, being in court.
Yeah.
And solicitors are not in court, are more public facing and focused. And so the distinction has kind of evolved to whether you're in court or not in court. And in Alberta, all lawyers are both barristers and solicitors, and they can choose how they want to focus their practice. I do mostly solicitor work, which means I do, corporate and commercial business transactions. I do real estate, both residential and commercial. I do estate administration and estate planning, all of which I kind of call the happy law, which kind of keeps me out of the courtroom. But I also have done
being in court, being the unhappy, because it's very acrimonious.
Always,
yes,
always.
Yeah.
But I also do some of that unhappy law. I do foreclosure work. I do some collections work, and then I also make small applications when any of that happy law tiptoes its way into some of that unhappy law, and they're just smaller things that require one-off applications, and they're not big, full lawsuits that are multi-years long and need an actual barrister to take that. And so with estate administration, that's, when someone passes away and you actually are now looking after their estate, identifying their assets, liquidating the estate,
getting a will to probate and moving it through. Okay.
So doing all of that, and then the planning is actually creating the will, creating an enduring power of attorney, creating a personal directive, and kind of dealing with all of that before someone has passed away or become incapacitated. And then on the real estate side, all of that, just buying and selling property. I do commercial leasing, kind of buying and selling businesses. It's kind of all of that. I have a very wide practice, and keeps me fairly busy.
That sounds like an enormously broad scope. Is there anything that really resonates with you? Is there something that's more fun or more happy than some of the other aspects?
It's going to sound horrible, but I enjoy the foreclosure work the most, not because of the subject matter, but foreclosure blends the solicitor elements because it's got all of that financing and mortgages and kind of blends all of that, and then it gets me into court as well. And foreclosure work is very formulaic. It's the same applications, it's the same process, with little tweaks here and there depending on the parties involved. And so I like doing the work because it keeps me sharp and keeps those skills available, but it also allows me to make sure that I'm doing my financing files in a way that makes sure that I'm doing them correctly, and if someone had to foreclose on them, and they're done correctly and in a way that if the bank had to realize on that security, it's
you can
done properly.
Here you go, here's the package.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Those bite-sized files, right? We always look forward to them.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, obviously there's lots of people out there who may be thinking about a career in law or are young lawyers aspiring. What advice would you give around either lessons you've learned or, what would you say to people? How should they accelerate their careers, or what should they consider before taking that jump? Any thoughts on kind of your lessons learned?
So it's funny, we were talking about undergrads earlier. My advice there is not to stress about picking the right undergrad. I think it's far more important to do an undergrad in something that you enjoy, that you're going to excel at, and get the grades in to allow you to get into a law school.
So do something, learn something, do well, and you've now got a base.
Exactly. And if law doesn't work out, and for whatever reason you're unable to get into law school, you have a degree with which you could go get a job, and you kind of got that background and back up should you need to take advantage of it.
Okay.
I think I'll add two things to that. The first one is, yes, don't necessarily go into post-secondary with an end goal in mind. If you have one, that's great. If you want to be a lawyer, great. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everyone, for reasons I'll get to in my second point. But use that experience to kind of learn about yourself and figure out what you like to do. And I think even more importantly than post-secondary education, go into the workforce. Okay, get a job, get some work experience, see how the real world works. Not only is that experience going to carry through to whatever you end up doing later on, but chances are you might find something that you like doing more than what you initially planned when you first started a post-secondary degree, for example. And that ties into my second point. So keep an open mind, explore, get some work experience. Because point number 2 is, if you do want to go into law, I think the key to happiness in the legal profession is to have a niche. And that's a conversation that we were just having, right? What is that spark, that practice area that gives you interest, that lets you go and walk into the office every day and be like, yes, I'm excited to work on this. Because if you don't have that niche or that one particular area where you love to practice, it's going to be a slog. Like most jobs, okay, it's not easy. Okay, you are being paid to do it for a reason, but find those sparks that are important. Exactly. So if you can find a niche or an area of specialty where you have a particular interest, develop that, guard it jealously, that will be the thing that keeps you going for the rest of your career.
And so the spark for you then is that connection between science and law and that translation interconnection?
Exactly.
And for you, the order structure of that clean, neat file that you can just sort of slide across.
Order and structure and I get along very well.
Okay, that's great. No, great advice. And as you think about your own careers, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently now? Or is there one thing you could change and maybe have adjusted slightly? Or are you happy with, no, the path was the way it was supposed to be and I'm here because I'm supposed to be in this way?
Yeah, you know, those questions are always really interesting to me, but, you know, when I look at how my practices progressed and my careers progressed, you know, I don't really think I would change anything. I think I'm exactly where I want to be right now, and I'm here with exactly who I want to be here with, and so I don't think I would change anything.
That's a hard question to answer because I think it depends on what your goals are. What do you want from life? And the answer to that question changes over time. So if you're in one situation and you want one thing, well, chances are if you're in a different situation, you're going to want a different thing. So I think I don't look at my career path and wish I changed something because right now I feel satisfied. I feel like I have a great job. I have a great, you know, life at home. I have a great opportunity to explore different hobbies and things that I want to do. And I don't look back and think, you know, if I changed that one thing, I would have had more of an opportunity to, you know, do something that I want to do, or I would have had more money to go do other things, or this and that and the other. I don't look back and wish I changed anything. And I think that is something that, you know, instead of focusing on making the right decision to get the things that you want, it's more adapting your current situation and being happy with that. Just move forward with your life. Everything tends to work out.
No, and the reason I ask is I think I'm the poster child for bouncing around and never anticipated having the career that I have. But when I look back, I'm like, no, everything prepared me for the next thing. And there was no conscious choice, but I'm so glad I have all of those things in the toolbox and under my belt and could move forward with them. So, I don't know, it's great to hear. So, I mean, there's a lot of chatter out there around AI everything. I mean, ChatGPT sort of brought it into the forefront. But AI and those tools have been a conversation point, and there's all these studies how lawyers and accountants are going to be completely obsolete because technology will just take over. So I'm interested in your thoughts on either how AI tools might be used in your practices today, and you know, is there value still in that human element? Presumably, your brains provide value. So I'm just curious what that looks like in the future as these technologies unfold.
I want to jump on this one first. I don't think there's anything particularly unique or special about the lawyer brain or the human brain. I think that from a technical perspective, yes, AI can do our jobs, okay? And AI can write out a contract. And AI can write out a brief to the court. And AI can even make verbal submissions nowadays with the incredible advances in like voice technology and everything that have happened. I think, though, that the thing that protects the legal profession is the legal profession. We are a very self-serving, very gated kind of profession, okay? We have a regulatory body that exists that controls who is allowed to practice law. And you know, I joke about it. That's not just something that exists to preserve a commercial monopoly that we might have over that industry. That's something that exists to protect the public, okay? All lawyers have to be insured, and all lawyers are governed by our governing body, the Law Society, in our case of Alberta.
With very stringent rules of behavior,
very stringent
codes of conduct,
ethics, right? Things that are difficult to program an AI to necessarily follow. So I think what preserves our industry from the advancement of a complete takeover by AI, not to get too far into doomsday scenario, is that when people hire a lawyer, they do so not because of the words we put on a page, but because we're insured. If we turn out to be wrong, then you get to make a claim against our professional liability insurance. That doesn't exist with an AI. And the same thing goes with our code of conduct. If we do something that's unethical, then you make a complaint to the Law Society of Alberta and it's dealt with. Because of those checks and balances, I think we're relatively isolated from being completely subsumed. But it is a tool, I think, for sure, that will change the way that the practice of law is conducted.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Interesting. I don't think that AI, I think AI will always have a place, and I think it will become a tool like anything else, and those lawyers that use it to their advantage, will be well served by it.
Right.
And I think those that refuse to get on board with it will get left behind, as is with any sort of new tool and new technology. But I think there are two words that save the profession, and those two words are "it depends." It's the hallmark of
the answer of every lawyer ever on anything.
Yeah. And I think AI can be programmed to do a lot of things, a lot of fact scenarios, but every single fact scenario and every single file that I seem to get is similar to another file, but there's some sort of little tweak that makes you go, oh, but I have to change this in this way.
Right.
And, I don't know if AI will ever have that human element that it will be able to necessarily think through all of those things, or, be able to have the skills that a 20-year litigator has, or just all of that stuff that comes with having experience.
Right.
And there's a human element to the practice of law as well, right? It's not just two lawyers sitting in a room arguing about, well, no, the law is this, no, the law is this. It's two clients also sitting in a room, either trying to build something together or trying to resolve a conflict among them. There's a human judge sitting on the bench above them trying to make a decision, right? So I think that as long as there's going to be that human element, it's going to be difficult for AI to necessarily predict or create a, yes, that's for sure the answer, because the answer is it depends because of that human element.
And the variables that
exactly. Now,
creates.
A person, you and I, as lawyers, are probably no better equipped than AI necessarily to predict what an outcome on a file is going to be. But what we are able to do is counsel our clients, walk them through the process, be a guiding light, a guiding hand through whatever sort of thing they're going through, be it, the excitement of creating a new business, or probating a will, or, litigating a dispute. There is a benefit to having that person who is there to assist you. But not everyone can afford a lawyer, right? At the end of the day, we're working for firms that are private businesses, and they're trying to survive just like every other private business. So I think that AI could potentially have a greater role in access to justice issues, right? Providing people who can't afford a lawyer or otherwise cannot get access to a lawyer with a little bit more assistance than they currently have.
Some at least base level of advice.
Exactly. Help writing, because half the population is considered to be illiterate based upon recent studies. So having a tool that allows more people to gain more sophisticated access to information, answer questions about technical areas like the law, I think that is the major benefit of AI, and that's where it could replace a lot of the work that we do to the benefit of society.
Okay, for sure. Now you're both very active on various boards, committees, commissions. It's tough to keep track of both of you sometimes and all of your different volunteer activities. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the things you might be involved in, but more importantly, why. You both have very busy lives, very busy professional practices, and yet you still somehow shoehorn in volunteering and giving back. And so I'm always curious to know what drives people to give up more of their time, and sort of why you do that.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I can start. So currently, as you said, I'm involved in a few things. I sit on the board of the YWCA, the Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development Lethbridge, Lethbridge Bar Association, sit on a CBA committee. Is that it right now? I think that covers it right now. But all of those things for me are cut fillers. That's why I do them. I've always had a belief that the legal profession is a giving profession, is that human and service profession, and so I always thought to myself, once I had attain the skills and that knowledge, that there was a duty to share that and to use that for the betterment of my community. And, even as young as, 13 years old, I, was sitting on the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council in Medicine Hat.
Okay.
I was kind of always that keener kid who wanted to do things like that and be sitting at tables where decisions were being made and wanting to be a part of those things. And so, going through my undergrad and through law school, there wasn't time to do that. And so the moment I kind of got to Lethbridge and went, hey, I've got time for that stuff now, I walked into Richard Davidson's office and said, hey, the chamber interests me, and I'm told you're the chamber guy, so tell me about that. What do I do? And he immediately was like, you join the board. And I went, well, let's back up the bus here. I don't think I can do that yet. And so he suggested I join a committee. And so that's where we started. And the rest is kind of history from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have a rule. I try to only volunteer for one board at a time.
Okay.
Because
opposite my rule.
Opposite.
There may be a lesson there, but anyway.
I find that I tend to get very distracted very easily if I have too many, tentacles and too many different things as once. So I prefer to focus on one board or one organization and really pour my attention on that.
Okay.
I feel like I can have more of an impact, and it gives me a greater sense of, responsibility and involvement. And just recently I stepped off the board of Economic Development Lethbridge. I finished my 4-year term, and now I'm in the process of looking for my next board once I have a chance to refresh a bit. I think in addition to board stuff, what I like doing is teaching as well.
Okay.
So I do a lot of volunteer lecture work at the college. I work with some organizations at the University of Lethbridge as well, like the iGEM program, trying to educate people who are likely to have some kind of, involvement or experience with intellectual property in the future, right? Be it, students who are going to enter into the business community, students who are developing new ideas or new technologies. I like to try and use the expertise that I've gained to set them up right, make sure that they're taught and have some exposure. So I love doing that. The reason why, for me, why do I join boards? Why do I volunteer my time? It goes back to being a younger person as well. Now, the term volunteering for me, I find very negative. It has connotations because when I was in school, it was always, you have to volunteer for this. You have to volunteer for that.
Okay.
If you want to apply for law school, you have to have volunteering on your resume. So for me, it has a very negative connotation as being these extracurricular things that you need in order to progress your career. And I think that does volunteering as a whole disservice.
Because it's not a check the box.
Exactly. It's supposed to be a way of having involvement in your community that goes beyond just your job or your career.
Okay.
And I think when I reframe it like that in my mind, that's why I do it, is because it does allow me to feel involved. It allows me to meet more people. It allows me to grow my network, make friends, right? We go for coffee. We're at different firms. We should be enemies, but because of our board involvement, we become
I should have
friends.
sat in the middle. Got it. Sorry.
No.
Our bad.
So like that, I think is what makes volunteering so cool. Is that it allows you to be a much better community member. It allows you to meet more people in the community, and there's no downside to doing that ever.
Yeah, you're going to learn something. You're going to meet someone. There's something that comes out of that contribution, right? And you're making hopefully your community a better place to be.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool.
Most of the really close relationships I have right now out in the business community are as a result of the volunteer work that I've done, and a lot of the opportunities I've had are exactly that. So I couldn't
But
agree
not
more.
because we're going out searching for that work, right?
Oh, yeah,
like that's
correct.
the thing. It's
Yeah.
not just a way of progressing your career. There's far more that just happens to come out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if it happens to grow your network or grow your business or broaden your network,
Great.
that's amazing. But that's sort of secondary, right?
Absolutely.
Now, so again, coming back to very busy practice, growing your practice, lots going on. Presumably you have friends and family. You've got all of these extracurricular activities, all these contributions you're making. So how do you balance this thing with, work life, quality of life, just keeping yourself fresh? I mean, how do you take care of yourself with all of these huge demands? Like what's your strategy? What's your thing? What's your outlet, I guess?
I moved to Lethbridge.
Okay.
You make decisions in life to prioritize the things that are important to you. And for me, when I was looking at, do I stay in a big city, do I stay in a big firm, or do I take the opportunity to move home? What made that decision for me was being able to come home and have more of a work-life balance, to be able to be healthier, have better relationships with the people I love, to do more things that I want to do outside of work. I moved home so that I would have the opportunity to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the commute times, the proximity, just the different community vibe, all contributes to that wellness in a way. Okay.
Yeah, so I never had a job where I didn't have that, and so, you know, I think I'm very fortunate that I sought that out immediately from law school. You know, I didn't participate in what they called the off-campus interview process. I didn't seek out the big firms, and, you know, that was kind of unnerving in law school, and, you know, because everybody was doing it, and I was kind of like, I'm going to do my own thing, and, you know, I sought out firms in Lethbridge and did that differently, and so I've been fortunate to always kind of have that structurally built into my practice. But, you know, if I'm being perfectly honest, I struggled to balance some of that wellness side of things, and sometimes it takes a back seat, and, you know, it's a little bit of a do as I say, not as I do. And
Guilty.
You know,
yeah.
And, you know, lately I've had my body's been forcing me to put it front and center, and I've not really had a choice. Been struggling a little bit with a neurological condition that's just been kind of humbling me. And
so all of a sudden you have no choice but to behave yourself and follow. Yeah,
exactly. And, you know, I'm very fortunate. My husband is extremely supportive. He's, you know, that cheerleader in my life that, you know, he supports me through doing the shopping and the meal prepping, and, you know, being my, you know, shoulder to cry on, and my you know, person to really talk to about absolutely anything. And so to have that supportive person to also riding shotgun with me, I think being able to lean so heavily on him allows me to do all of the stuff that I do.
Gotcha.
Because if I was fumbling around on my own, I think I would be struggling a lot more to keep up with my wellness. And so, I mean, not everybody can just go out and get themselves a mark. And some people joke, it's, you know, I need a mark, but
he's not available for rent.
No, unfortunately not. He's all mine.
Okay.
But you know, that's kind of, I guess, my wellness situation.
Don't be afraid to lean on other people, right? Be it, you know, professionally, within your career, family, friends. You don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, and sometimes just knowing that can be a relief in and of itself, right? Okay. So as you look forward, you know, is there something that you're both aspiring to or looking towards, or just content to continue on this current path? Just wondering what comes next for these two rising stars in Lethbridge's legal profession.
That's a good question. What is next? I don't know. It's whatever next ends up being.
Okay.
I don't, like, a lot of people I think have like their 5-year plan, right? They have they're razor focused on getting a particular outcome, and I've never been like that. You know, floater doesn't necessarily sound good, but I've always kind of just gone through. I've you know, gone with the punches and benefited from all of the benefits that have come as well, and I've kind of just let myself you know, experience life as it comes at me. And I think that's what I'm excited about, is just seeing, well, what is next, right? What hobby am I going to pick up next? A lot of my friends make fun of me because I collect hobbies. I don't collect things. I collect hobbies. I collect the thing that I am like focused on for, you know, 3 weeks and then never look at again.
3D printing was in there.
3D printing, okay. I tried sewing at some point. You know, I'm sure I have some Warhammer figurines in my basement. I don't know. Like, it's just like, I love seeing things and doing things and experiencing things and trying things. And that's what I look forward to.
Okay.
And I just want to keep that coming. Let's see what's around the next corner.
Whatever brings, and we'll
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
it's funny how like
we're kind of opposite.
We are. So
that's why you're seated together, because you have a very different sort of philosophical approach to life sometimes.
Yeah, you know. So I mean, literally from the time I was small, I mean, there was always a goal, something, something we were working towards. And I distinctly remember at my bar call. Once I had been called to the bar, it was a very small ceremony because I had the distinct pleasure of being a COVID bar call, and so instead of having,
lovely,
you know, the
big celebration and the big to-do, not so much.
Yeah,
after all that work,
there were 6 of us,
okay.
And I was fortunate to have that, but it was not what I had in mind. But I distinctly remember my father-in-law turned to me, said, "So what now?" And it was like, man, like it kind of caused me pause because everyone knows me as the always having a what now and a goal and a something I'm working on. And so I actually am just at a stage right now where once I had become partner at Davidson and Williams, that was the last kind of
You're like, well,
goal.
That's the notch.
And so now I'm focused on just enjoying that, and instead of climbing upwards, I'm looking at expanding outwards and, you know, joining more, you know, not more boards at the same time, but, you know, once I'm done current terms, you know, just spreading myself out and,
okay.
you know, doing different things and creating more relationships and just doing more of the same thing and, you know, going with the flow, which is something I've not historically done.
Before.
So
it's kind of fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
That in and of itself will be an adventure.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, I mean, you're also, because amongst your many duties and responsibilities, you're the chair of the Young Professionals Committee for the Chamber of Commerce still? Yeah. And so I'm curious about whether either of you have had a mentor kind of influence your career or your career path, because that tends to be a focus, especially for young professionals. So has there been someone that's been instrumental in shaping your pathway and guiding you through that? Or is that something that, you know, just never materialized? Curious on your experiences there.
Oh gosh, there have been so many.
Okay.
I owe where I'm at today to so many people who have helped me along. I couldn't pick out one as being particularly important because they all played a critical role at a critical time. But there is one quote from one mentor that will always stick with me. And I'm going to modify the quote slightly because we're on TV. It's flap around and find out.
Okay.
And I think that's what I was getting at too with my last piece about not necessarily having a goal, is that, you know, it's okay in life to not be perfect and not know everything. You're not going to be able to, you know, predict every possible future or outcome. You're not going to have all the information you need to make a decision. Sometimes you just got to throw yourself into the fray and trust yourself and trust your own abilities to know that you'll be able to manage the situation. And like, you know, I think we're both pretty type A, high-achieving younger people, certainly in at least a past life. So getting that advice from a mentor that, you know, it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to fail at some things if overall you have success. That is, you know, a change in mindset, a new way of thinking that has really followed me for the rest of my life after that person really drove home that quote to me. So that's probably the single most important piece of advice I ever received.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think it's something that we don't necessarily associate with a profession like law, right? That's structured and there's a path and you got to do this. It's like, no, you like just go experience, go make things happen, learn the hard lessons. And if you fail, that's okay too. That's learning. Right.
And I'll throw in there too, like that's part of why but that's part of why the transition from science to law was kind of complex for me, because you go from science where you can experiment and find a particular answer with something.
And there is an answer.
And there is an answer. Like the physical world is set the way that it is. And then you go into law and the answer is, it depends. What do you mean it depends?
There is no answer.
What? Like that doesn't work for me. So, you know, the flap around and find out idea, that was a way for me to reconcile those two worlds. Is that, you know, maybe there's a right answer, maybe there's not. It's the process of experimentation to figure out what the outcome is going to be, right? You're gonna, you know, do whatever you're gonna do, and the outcome is set. It will be whatever it is. You just might not be able to predict it in advance. So that's something that, you know, helped me reconcile those two worlds, because they are quite different.
For sure. Okay. And Charlene, for you, either best advice or influence of a mentor?
Yeah. So I completely agree. I've had more mentors than I could count along the way, and at key moments in life. I mean, certainly, the firm I worked for in Medicine had those lawyers not said to me, hey, I probably wouldn't be sitting here, and I have many mentors at my firm who mentor me through all different subject matter types of mentorship, and I think that's extremely important. But I think right now I'd have to say Cindy, actually, CEO of the Chamber, Cindy Bester. She's been very key as of late, especially with just kind of the wellness stuff I have going on. And it's funny, we were talking about leaning on other people, and that's been a big shift for me, trying to do that. And she's been someone who's been pushing me towards that and reminding me, like, you can pump the brakes. Like, you're at a stage right now where your body's telling you to pump the brakes, and you don't need to be going 90 miles an hour all the time.
Right.
And I don't know, she always has this leadership style that I think strikes that delicate balance between compassion and authenticity with that strong and firm leader. And I think I got the compassion and authenticity down, but the blend between the two is where I struggle. And so I just have always admired her style and just watching how she works and leads.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to share with our audience tonight as we wrap up, and you think about your journey, you think about what comes next? Any other advice or any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience tonight?
Always seek legal advice before making any decision.
Good advice. Always seek legal advice before making decisions. Okay.
And then I'll leave off with just saying that, we've been talking a lot about career advice and developing your career. I think one of the most important things not to forget is, a job is going to be something that's hard to do. Try and find those nuggets that really keep you going, be it in your job or outside of your job. That's what's going to keep you fresh. That's what's going to keep you excited. And you just got to go find that happiness.
Find those nuggets of happiness and hold on tight. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, if you appreciated my insights today and wanted to learn more about those and read some additional ones, to direct people back to the Chevette.
Right.
And so last fall, that was a project that I launched, and was actually fortunate to win a CLAWBY, a Canadian Law Blog Award, for that.
That's awesome. Last
year. And so you can check that out at www.thecheffette.com, and Cheffette is SCHEFFETTE.com.
Awesome. So, yeah. Thank you both for joining me this evening and providing a bit of an insight into your world. Very much appreciate your time tonight.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
So join me next month, July the 18th. We'll have not one but two members of Lethbridge City Council here. So Belinda Croson and Jen Schmidt-Rempel will be here to talk about women in local politics. So that will be always exciting and interesting. And we thank you for joining us this evening.